Hey everyone, today we're ranking all 25 of the killer Moris in Dead by Daylight. Of course, this is just my own list and opinion, but be sure to share your own in the comments also. Let's get into it. First off, we have Trapper, who comes in at 25. His Mori is just a product of its time, as it's just kinda boring. He doesn't interact with the survivor tool, he just walks on up and slashes them with a foot down. I mean, it's fine, but in comparison to what we have now, it just seems incredibly underwhelming. There's a missed opportunity with incorporating his bear traps into this also. Next we have Hillbilly. Billy's is another quite generic one, but is slightly better as he has a cooler weapon over Trapper to finish the kill with, which is his chainsaw. Overall, this Mori is alright, maybe a bit reserved for the character of Hillbilly, but also just quite a plain and straightforward animation, but certainly slightly better than Trapper's. Wraith's up next, which completes our bottom three being the original three killers. Wraith is a little bit better in my opinion, as he has kind of a cool interaction where he drags the survivor by the leg as they try to crawl away. It's not much, but it just adds a bit of brutality to the Mori and creates more of a power dynamic between himself and the survivor. Nothing special, but a little more to it than just slapping the survivor with his weapon. Pig's up next, and it's in the same kind of territory as Trapper. Pig also feels like she could use something from her power or abilities, although she does have a cool interaction where the survivor blocks the attack first. And I do like that she does the throat slit also. However, her not using her reverse bear trap or using it in an interesting way, especially as she's known to rig the traps unfairly within the Saw films, seems like the perfect thing for this Mori, and a clear missed opportunity. In 21 we have Freddy's, which is another pretty boring one, with the small redeeming quality of having more of a cinematic look to it with interesting angles, and it also being a reference to a scene from the A Nightmare on Elm Street film. This one has quite a bit more brutality than the others, but I don't know, I've personally never liked this one too much. But it does seem suited to the Freddy we have, who has much less personality than the one from the original films. So hey, I guess it's okay. Huntress's one is super brutal, which is why I've ranked it a bit higher than some of the other earlier killers to be released. In this Mori, Huntress swings her axe down right onto the survivor's head, rips it out, and then just repeatedly slams it. She's got no chill, kinda fitting with her little tantrum she has whenever a pallet is dropped onto her. This is also very character fitting overall and makes sense for Huntress's relentless nature, but still quite a simple one and more similar to the just slamming the weapon into the survivor Moris, like Trappers and Hillbillies. The twins Mori is honestly fairly similar to a lot of these lower ones in that it just has the killer slam the survivor a bunch basically. I do like the small interaction where Victor requests if he can go and jump on the survivor, as Charlotte confirms, allowing him to then leap down and tear away, which is a nice little detail. They do have the second Mori also, which can be done when Victor is absent. The Charlotte only one is kinda like the Trapper or Wraith ones where she just stands over them and smacks them. It's better with Victor, but honestly nothing special. Bubba's Mori I actually like a lot, despite it being really simple, as it's very fitting to his character and just extremely brutal as he treats the survivor like an animal in a slaughterhouse. It feels like Billy should have had a similar one to this. If anything, it might make more sense for Hillbilly to have had this one instead. But yeah, overall super grisly stuff and very character fitting, and a better usage of the hammer and chainsaw over Hillbilly. Doctor, despite being a super messed up guy, doesn't have a particularly messed up Mori. Although this is a cool and pretty unique one, it's a bit tame for Doctor, who is possibly the most twisted killer that we have in the game. He seems to kill them a little too quickly, as weird as that sounds, for what we see comparatively in his Tome cutscenes. It's cool and uses the electricity well, but I think it's all just a little off. Again, it's different though from just flailing the weapon about, which is always nice. Next up we have our other Doctor, the Blight. This Mori is good considering the character of the Blight, with use of the syringe that stabs into the survivor, where it then expands into these big orange pustules, that the Blight then finally pops. It works for Blight. It's a bit different and really gross, and definitely better for being a bit more unique. Comparing it to a similar character like Doctor, this Mori definitely works a lot better I think, and exemplifies their strange experiments more so, and definitely has a bit more brutality and personality even. Spirits is very character fitting as she just thrashes her katana away at the survivor in pure rage. It has some nice angles and a usage of the power with the Mori, which is always good, as she jumps around phasing as she takes the different swings at the survivor. Well, this is her passive phasing maybe, either way. Overall, her Mori is done well and fits in with her lore, although I think as it is just her thrashing away and screaming, it maybe doesn't quite have the same effect as some of the other more unique Moris. Maya's Mori is a cool one and feels like a bit of a classic one, as he shows how much stronger he is than all of the survivors as he yanks them up, and then uses his knife to slowly end them. It makes you feel small and inferior in comparison to him as you stare into his soulless eyes and mask. This one's done really well I think, especially considering Maya's as a character and his role of embodying literal evil. The Mori is one of the more chilling ones, despite its relative simplicity. Nemesis's Mori is quite cool and quite a brutal one, especially with his stomp. We also get slightly differentiated versions when he performs this Mori on any STARS members, where he says STARS as a result. Overall, I like how they incorporate the tentacle into this, and then shift it into just straight up using the boot to finish the kill. It seems fitting for a powerful bioweapon to be so efficient. In number 12 we have Nurse. Nurse gets this spot solely because her Mori is just extremely different from all of the others, even though in terms of her lore it doesn't make too much sense considering her Tome lore. However, she has a unique way of doing things which doesn't involve just thrashing a blade at the survivor, but instead choking them then closing their eyes, in an almost caring way, which is nice and also quite humanizing for an otherwise merciless killer. The closing of the eyes especially is a very nice touch. Next up we have Legion. This Mori is cool to me as it has two regular-ish sized people in a struggle as they would be in a real scenario. As the Legion are basically normal people and powerless people, just they have a knife and the survivors don't. It evens the playing field and has the survivors show more of an effort to directly fight back against the Legion member attacking them, slashing away at their hands and such, even dodging one of their attacks initially, getting pushed back before pinning the survivor once more. I like this one because it feels so much more brutal seeing the struggle prior to the final blow, and almost admits the seeming weakness of the Legion while still exemplifying their strength. Pyramid Head's Mori is a lot like Maya's one, except just bumped all the way up to 10, as he makes the survivor seem like a literal ant in comparison to him in strength. It's also just a lot more dramatic with the cinematic style to it, as the survivor is lifted up then pierced with the oversized knife. I do like the Moris a lot too, that spawn in different things to interact with the survivor further. In this case we have the metal and barbed wire that comes in to wrap the survivor up. Great Mori. There's also the small edition of the shorter Mori, which is a quick and efficient one that exemplifies the relentlessness of the executioner also. Plague's Mori is one that I like a lot more after the comments from last video that mentioned she isn't just being sick on the survivor, but instead drowning them in her vomit, which you know is pretty horrible. This whole Mori feels like a mini ritual, as she's sick, smacks the survivor back in disgust as she does a chant. Yep, I like this one a lot more than I used to, and again it's character fitting and also visually unique in comparison to a lot of the other Moris. Oh! Trickster has a lot of personality and his Mori really shows it off well. Starting off, he just flicks all of his knives at the survivor, bending around acrobatically as the survivor stands, getting peppered by all the blades. Finally, he tosses his autograph photo down onto the survivor, almost like a little calling card. The incorporation of his power is good, and the photo is a nice touch too. Very character fitting and also quite a visually engaging Mori. Next up we have the Demogorgon. Demo's Mori is incredibly brutal and is one of the most violent ones, and fitting for the animalistic, but also super cute, Demogorgon. It pins the survivor down and then swings their head around inside of its mouth, with the survivor's scream becoming muffled as they are absorbed by it. Very cool, fitting for Demo, and shows it as a merciless and animalistic killer. But not quite as brutal as the one up next. Oni's is about as brutal as you would expect from someone who became a literal demon legend, using everything in his arsenal and crushing the survivor's tongue just to add insult to injury. This is also very cool, as this is basically what he does to the lord who desecrates his name, so the crushing of the tongue definitely has more weight behind it. This Mori is probably the most brutal one, possibly a little bit over the top to an extent. Overall, this Mori does a perfect job in almost every regard, especially for the character of the Oni. I like Deathslinger's Mori a lot, as it incorporates Slinger's power and own invention, the spear gun, into it very well. The whole Mori has a cool execution style to it, as he shoots the spear of the gun through the back of the survivor's head and straight out of their mouth, lifting them up and then kicking them off the spear like he's cleaning some dirt off his shoe. Also, just prior to this, he just straight up stabs the bayonet into the survivor's back, which is also just chilling and adds a little extra to the Mori, showing just how brutal that bayonet can be. Clown's one is horrible and has all these grim sounds in it, like him slurping on the severed finger and the crack as he slams a foot down on the survivor's head, which takes a few attempts to actually do. After he adds the survivor's fingers to his collection, which you can see hanging around his belt, which is so creepy and chilling, knowing that as the survivor you've basically been added to his collection. There are also two versions of his Mori, one where you cut off the pinky finger on the left hand, and another which cuts off the index on the right hand, respectively done to male characters and female characters. The small differentiation is a nice little bonus. Ghostface's Mori is up next and is just the most unique. It's fun to watch and can make for great screenshots. It's also really in line with his character and lore and adds a bunch of personality to his character also, who's said throughout the lore to be incredibly twisted and very focused on flaunting the expertise of his own kills in the paper. Basically, it's great gameplay wise, lore wise, and in terms of visuals, so I feel like it's the perfect Mori as it takes all those boxes. In number 2 we have Hag. Hags is the most brutal, horrible thing to view out of all of the Moris, I think, even in comparison to Oni's. It's something about the small stature but clear substantial power and strength as she leaps onto the survivor and then pins them down, clawing out an organ of some kind from the survivor, possibly a liver. Like the Legion, there is also some resistance here from the survivor, which is cool again given her smaller stature in comparison to some of the other killers. There's also a cool moment where the survivor looks back just in time to see her jumping, before she bites down into their neck, using her claws to steady herself on the ground. This Mori is insane and makes you look on in horror as you see her tearing the survivor apart. Coming in at number 1, we have Pinhead's Mori. This is the newest Mori and honestly a really amazing one. I was shocked by how good this one was. It incorporates a lot of cool elements and doesn't even technically kill the survivor, they just get sucked off into the floor. To start this off, we have Pinhead stab his chains into the survivor, pulling their skin as the hooks stick in, which is a really cool animation, lifting them up all ceremonially before attaching them to a pole that comes from a portal in the ground and then just thrusting them down. He also speaks in it too, which is really cool also. It works well with his backstory, it looks visually quite amazing, and it incorporates different features like the portal, chains, and pole, making it all the more grandiose to an extent. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and be sure to drop your own rankings down below. Thanks, and goodbye.